Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Director Anderson?
Here.
Director Colson?
Here.
Director DeWitt?
Here.
Director Durante? Director Frega? Director Fuentes?
Here.
Director Higgins?
Here.
Director Cotel?
Here.
Director Lewis?
Here.
Director McGallis?
Here.
Director Melvin?
Here.
Director Payne?
Here.
Director Ross? Dr. Sager? Director Troiani?
Here.
Chairman Dillard?
Here.
We have a quorum of 14 present with 2 absent and no one on the phone.
Excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The first item of business is item 3A, and that's the approval of the minutes from the meeting held on May 17th, 2018. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, how about if I get a motion and a second and we approve those? Director Lewis moves that we approve the May 17th meeting minutes, seconded by Director Christopher Melvin. Let's get a baseline roll call, Madam Secretary, so take the roll on this,
Okay.
please.
Director Anderson?
Yes.
Director Colson?
Yes.
Director DeWitt?
Yes.
Director Frega?
Aye.
Director Fuentes?
Aye.
Director Higgins?
Aye.
Director Cotel?
Yes.
Director Lewis?
Yes.
Director McGallis?
Aye.
Director Melvin?
Yes.
Director Payne? Director Ross?
Yes.
Director Troiani?
Yes.
Chairman Dillard?
Aye.
We have a quorum of 14 ayes and 2 absent.
Super. Thank you, everyone. Item 4 is the public comment segment of our meeting, and today we have no scheduled speaker. So we'll go on to item 5, which is the chairman's report. And I've invited Jim DELINQUENCY, Metra's CEO, and Pete Zwolfer, the Deputy Executive Director of Operations, to our meeting today. I've asked them to give a brief presentation about how Metra is implementing the federally required positive train control, or PTC, that nearly $400 million unfunded mandate. I'm a guinea pig of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe route, which is where PTC is first rolled out a week or so ago, and just to ask Jim to come over and Pete and kind of give us a little refresher course on what PTC is, how it's going, and we appreciate both you gentlemen being here today, and always appreciate your accessibility. When I call either of these gentlemen on their cell phones, it is an instant response, and very much appreciate that line of communication, not only to me, but to our staffs as well. So welcome, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Board, for the opportunity to be here to update everyone a little bit on PTC. Maybe even take some members here and public that don't really understand what PTC is, other than a 3-letter acronym for positive train control, and kind of tell you why we're here today. June 11th, we rolled out a new schedule on the BNSF line. As the Chairman said, kind of a guinea pig, but really it was strategic. We're not the owner of the BNSF. We're not the operator of the BNSF. The BNSF has led the country in the implementation of PTC nationwide. They wanted Chicago, where they moved the most amount of people of any of our lines and the most amount of people of anywhere on their network, to be one of the priorities. And we'll talk a little bit as I go through the presentation today about the challenges that we've had. We've also would like to talk about the fact that the rail industry still remains one of the safest modes of transportation in the country. Just this one?
Just do the arrow.
Ooh, we got an
Yeah.
arrow. Okay, so I start with something from 1972. This is on the Illinois Central. This is right near McCormick Place. And why? Because as we talk about what PTC was mandated today, it's not that it's the first time ever that we've ever had rail incidents. This particular one, the double-decker cars there were brand new in 72. The train overshot a platform. It had to back up. If you can believe it or not, in those days, radios weren't there. The back train, which was built in 26, didn't even have a speedometer on it. They were called the old heavyweights. The mass of that train basically went into that front train, and as you can see, 45 people died. This happened on the eve of Halloween that year, and it's an eye-opener. Every time the rail industry has an incident, it actually moves forward. This particular incident mandated that, or I should say recommended that all front of passenger trains have the striping on it of some sort, some type of marker. In this particular case, would PTC have prevented this? Absolutely. Back then, cell phones weren't even a thought process. So you can kind of see how much farther we can go. So this is the big one. This is Chatsworth in 2008. An Amtrak train, Metrolink passenger train, which is Los Angeles, collided directly head-on into a Union Pacific freight train. Freight train was moving at 30 miles an hour. The Metrolink train was moving at 52 miles an hour. This is kind of what it looked like, and there was 25 deaths and 135 injured. It was a very early morning train. It could have been much worse. Technical. So this is kind of what it looked like, although this is the NTSB crash investigation. They actually flipped the train around so it's engine to engine. So you can imagine that cab car has a lot less mass. There's a lot more people in that cab car when it collided with that freight train. What happened here? The operator of the passenger train was doing something other than paying attention to the railroad that he should have been doing. At the time, it wasn't known. It was later found out he was texting. He went by a red signal. That red signal was there specifically to allow the other train on that single track to proceed through. That didn't occur, and from that, this happened in September of 2008, the California legislator was leading the cause and mandated what we now know to be PTC. They moved it through the House and the Senate very quickly. So what is PTC? It's a computer overlay system that's designed to automatically stop a train when certain criteria are met. Let's do it in layman's terms. It will take over the brakes of the train when the operator doesn't slow the train down when he's supposed to. That's what it will do. 2008 of December, that's when it was mandated by Congress. A lot of people are critical of the rail industry, saying it's now 2018, you've been working on it 10 years, this is completely unacceptable. I engage in a lot of these conversations, specifically in Springfield and Washington. The fact of the matter is a lot of things had to be invented to make this system occur. January of 2010, that's actually when the FRA put out what this rule is. Congress just said make it happen. It took another 13 months for actually the FRA to tell us what you have to do. It is the largest regulation that we have in the rail industry. It's got more stuff within it, and it was because it was well thought out and a lot of things to prevent these incidents, but also to do it right the first time. Metrolink led. They said, we are going to lead. This happened on our railroad. It happened in California. They said, we're going to be the first one done. The original mandate was to be done by December 31st, 2015. They went in the revenue service demonstration. That's actually where passengers are on a PTC-operated train in Q4 of 2014. So here's the leaders of the country, and I have nothing against Metrolink. I think they did a fabulous job being the guinea pigs for the entire industry. Just 2 months ago, they finally went interoperable in 2018. That tells you how much this technology had to evolve. December 2015, actually Metro was one of the leaders. We went to Congress and we said we cannot operate after January 1 legally because of the mandate. We do not have PTC on. And Don Orsino, my predecessor, was one of the speakers there along with the AAR and really told the Congress where we're at in the industry. And they gave us a 3-year extension to the end of 2018. That's this year. Now, what it said is you had to make progress. You had to make a lot of progress. What they were worried is in the beginning, progress wasn't being made. And the reason progress wasn't being made on certain railroads in certain areas of the country, it varied. Each and every area had its own financial constraints, had its own operational constraints, and there's only a limited amount of people who actually can deploy this technology. So we have an extension right now that we'll be applying for moving beyond 2018, which will allow us to operate into 2020. But I'll touch base on that a little bit here in a second. Oh, button problem again. Oh, okay. There you go. And then I'll talk about the extension that we have to meet certain criteria to move forward. So what is PTC designed to do? only 4 things. It's to prevent train-to-train collisions. That's both from the head-on collision and rear-end collisions. It's to prevent derailments caused by speeding. If the operator is moving too fast in a certain sector, the PTC system will warn him to slow the train down. If he doesn't, she doesn't, PTC will stop the train. It doesn't slow it down. It doesn't control the acceleration of the train. It stops the train. It will prevent run-through of an improperly aligned switch. So in some cases, the switch, like maybe on that Metrolink train, was aligned for that freight train to come through that track and then have his own track. That Metrolink train possibly went through a red signal and then entered that single track going through an improperly aligned switch. That can cause derailment. A lot of times the switch just bends, and then the next train going through is the one that's in trouble because the switch is now bent up, but the signal system then prevents that. We have 4 current overlay safety systems inside the cab of the locomotive. This will be number 5. I just want to keep emphasizing the fact that we are a safe industry, and there's a lot of things we've done in the past from lessons learned. And this prevents unauthorized entry into working limits. One of the other things that kept happening in the industry is trains would enter a place where workmen had owned the track. They were working on the track. We call it owning the track. And that was a dispatcher error, could have been other different things. This now ties electronically the authority to move the train down the track with the working limits as well. So it prevents that. Who has to do it? Freight trains carrying hazardous material, anybody carrying passengers. There's a couple criteria. If you're a railroad that operates less than 4 times a day, less than 20 miles, you're starting talking about some of those scenic railroads. They don't have to do it. But if you're on the National Railway Network and you're on a Class 1 track and you're a scenic railroad, yes, you have to have PTC. 60,000 route miles are what's estimated nationwide. What's a route mile? Just for clarity, if you have 4 tracks on your railroad and you move 1 mile, that's 1 route mile. That's not 4 miles. When we talk track miles, because there's hundreds of thousands of track miles, so it's 60,000 route miles nationwide. Metro owns 217 and a half route miles. Our partners, the BNSF, the Union Pacific, the Canadian National, and some of the other smaller railroads own the rest of the 455 miles we operate over. It affects 41 railroads. 11 are freight, 30 are commuter, and it's going to cost the nation about $13 billion. So we talk about an unfunded mandate. This was a big ticket. They said, make it happen. It's a safety thing, but no one ever came up with the funding behind it. For Metro alone, as indicated, it's $400 million. So this thing real quick, how does PTC work? And this is just that 10,000 foot. That train down in the corner, for it to release its brakes, just to release its brakes so it can move, the operator has to go ahead and punch in all the information. How long is my train? How many cars on it? How many engines on it? Who am I? All of that has to be certified. That then sends a signal through the radio to the back office, where the back office then checks all those stats and then sends it back to the train saying you can go ahead and release your brakes. The back office is also talking to the route that the engineer actually says, I want to go. Now, in a simplistic world, even on the Burlington line, from Aurora to Union Station, you have to go through 2 routes. We have to go through a few thousand feet of Amtrak. Most of it is the Burlington. Actually, the Burlington's hosting that line right now. Southwest Service, you have to go over 6 routes. That means 6 back offices have to actually acknowledge the fact this train is going to move from A to B over 6 different routes. The wayside interface unit, the blue box in the bottom corner, that's actually connected to each and every signal, each and every switch, each and every cross point. And that thing is sending continual signals back to the back office, indicating its condition for the authority of the movement of that train. Now, as it's going down the track, the train's looking 5 miles ahead of it and 2 miles behind it. And there's a screen in front of the operator. If anything occurs where he says, the system says you need to start slowing down, it starts flashing yellow. It's in the warning zone. And it has a timer, and it's ticking down. And if he doesn't take action, it will then set the brakes. It sends off an enforcement penalty to the back office, which gets to the dispatchers, which says, we procedurally are going to try to figure out why exactly that train set its own brakes. That's it in the highest level, but here's the key. And one of the big keys we learned when we were trying to deploy this, not learned, it was just part of it. When you have 3 different tracks, you have to be precise. So the train that's sitting on track 1, which is only 21 feet to the right or to the left of track 2, that GPS has to be that accurate. When we first deployed this, those GPS units we were buying, the industry was buying, weren't military grade. Now we're military grade because we need to know we're on track 1, track 2, or track 3. So as they test these things, they learn things that you wouldn't assume. You might know you're at mile marker 3.2, but if you're on track 2 versus track 3, obviously it's a huge thing. And the computer knows what route you're supposed to take. That's us. For us, obviously 1,300 trains within this quarter, 1,400, 1,300 trains in this quarter daily. Communication between all of those trains, their back offices, all of those wayside units is going to be our big challenge. We have to put it on 528 of our cab cars, locomotives, highliners. We have 400 wayside signals just for the Metro trains. 8 base stations Metro had to put up. Base stations are those antennas that communicate with the back office. There's like 40 in the area, but there was the holes in the communication system said we needed to put 8 on our property. Critical feature mapping. That's where we actually put a truck with GPS, with radar, all this kind of stuff, go up and down the track and inch by inch by inch, mark where's the switch point start, where's the switch point end, where's the crossing start, where's the crossing end. So all of it has to be done, and each and every time any railroad moves anything, it has to be redone, put back into the database in the back. The back office had to be built. PTC lab had to be built. And then we had to convert our dispatching to a new system that speaks with this system. That's being cut over this Friday. And then interoperability. This is the big one that's just on the back end that just says they have to be interoperable. Well, this is the biggest lift. Like I was saying, in LA, they just finished it. It took them 18 months to go interoperable just on 3 segments. But thank God they did it, because those lessons will come forward this way. And for us, it's going to probably push our operating budget 15 to 20 million. Licenses, personnel, materials, all of that kind of stuff. It's the gift that keeps giving. Schedules. So one of the reasons we're here is we've seen an uptick in the amount of critical concerns on the BNSF. 35,000 riders a day. It's our largest line. It's our most robust line with the 3 main tracks. So one of the things we did was take, once again, lessons from LA. When LA deployed PTC in the beginning, they saw an immediate increase of 10% of all of their delays. They were down to 78% on-time performance. Our goal is 95. They took that hit, saying we're going to learn these lessons. And some of the things that they had to work on was the hardware, software had to be changed over again. Every time you learn a lesson, you have to change it over again, different radios. Sometimes now what we have to do, lesson learned from them, is we have to have double everything. 2 GPS antennas, 2 radio antennas, 2 modems. Because when one goes down, you got to have some way to back it up. And it should be very rare that we lose communication. Human error is huge. Why is human error huge? It's new to the dispatchers. It's new to the engineers. It's new to the technicians working on it. And so there's always a learning curve anytime you put new technology in place. And they required schedule changes because of flips. So we took those lessons learned and moved them forward. For our BNF schedule, we considered the following. Our historic on-time performance on the BN was 93.1. That dates back to 1978. That's our logs, go back that far. Our goals are 95. It's our highest ridership line. So one of the things we took into consideration when deploying this was trying to also work on the on-time performance. We took actual run data. So we took our GPS data and we took our signal data and we actually laid that against what the train's doing on the schedule versus when the train gets just to Aurora, because it was missing all its intermediate stops. It might be late in Hinsdale or it might be late in Naperville, but when it made it to Aurora on time, we considered it on time. So we straightened out the middle part of the schedule. And these were steps that we took in advance of doing the schedule change just so we had a better set of data to work with. We repurpose our equipment. What's that mean? We actually take a train from Aurora, we bring it in, we then send it back out to do more work in the morning, and sometimes it might do 5 trips in the morning before it goes to the yard. Smaller railroads, or even on ours, Heritage Corridor, we have 3 trains that come in, then they go to get work done, then they go back out. So they don't have to worry about repurposing. It depends on the line. Burlington has to repurpose, otherwise we'd have to have double the size of the yard, double the equipment, and then there's other considerations, which is yard and depot. So one thing people talk about is, like, we have a little bit of overcrowding situation that was occurring when we did our schedule change. We'll talk about that. But the yard out in Aurora only holds so many cars. By federal law, you can only park so many on a track. The depot down here, Chicago Union Station, the longest track we have is 11 cars. So even if you have an 11-car train that's over full, it's like, why don't you guys just add another car? It won't fit. It won't fit within the depot. The engine would be hanging over another 2 tracks. That would block 2 more tracks. You think we got a problem with this? When you start taking out tracks on us in the depot, it's even worse. And one of the other big considerations is Metra doesn't own the depot. And we're running against the flow of traffic. So we're bringing trains in on track 1, track 2. Well, some of those trains have to cut back over to pick passengers up. Some of those trains have to cut to the middle lane. Well, while you're bringing all those trains in for rush hour, you have to start running the trains back out. So when they're running back out, the last thing you want to do is have everybody loading on one track while another one has to sit out and wait. So all of these considerations had to be put in place for the time changes that we did. And that's the flip that we talk about. So a flip is when we move from the cab car back to the locomotive or from the locomotive back to the cab car. It's not just as simple as it is last 2 weeks ago where the engineer cuts out the brakes, they go do a job briefing, he cuts in the brakes on the other end, they do a brake test and he can go. Now he has to turn the PTC off, do all that other stuff, go to the other end, start hitting all those buttons and make sure everything's right and get authority to move forward. LA experienced the fact that they needed to go to 12 to 15 minutes per flip. That's what they saw. That's what the modeling that we brought forward saw. We hired the same consultant that LA used. It made a lot of sense. They came here. We had to look at the schedule. And we had to open it up. So here's one of the other things that I just wanted to talk about was the communication. And we've really tried to be ahead of this. So on March 19th, we announced there's going to be a schedule change, and here's the reasons why. We did videos that we've put on social media. They're on our website. We actually put QR codes right on the train cars just so if you want to learn about PTC, you could look. We sent out announcements to the passengers. We announced on board. We did distributed schedules at Union Station. We put our teams out there. We rode the trains. We posted signs. We did a lot of what we wanted, we should do. And what I guess you find is it doesn't bother anybody. It's, yeah, PTC, it costs you a lot of money, as long as it doesn't affect my train. Well, pretty soon, it looks like it affected almost everybody's train. And so now we've got a lot of fan mail coming in. We opened up online comments and suggestions based on the initial schedule. We received 2,000 comments. And then at our May board meeting, we took in all the considerations of some of the adjustments with stations, times, and everything else, and we did the best we could to move things around. One thing we can't predict is human behavior patterns. If you normally took the train at 7:05 and now your new options are 6:55 or 7:13, we couldn't predict whether you would go right or left. Some of that just had to go to the modeling. So what ended up happening is in the beginning, we knew we were going to have some overcrowding, and we did, and we've been working on that, and I'll touch on that. We announced that this was going to happen. We issued more news releases. We talked to the press. We really tried to get on top of things, but once again, until it affects that passenger, oh, we have a button issue again. Did you magic? Oh, here we go. Little button issue. Oop. Uh-oh. Yeah, we'll go with this. Once I got a hold of it, you got to keep going. So this is a flip. So just little chart. So train 1216, it actually starts out of Aurora. Its first stop where it picks up passengers is Western Springs. And you can see then what it does is arrives at CUS at 7:07. It leaves CUS at 7:14. That's a 7-minute flip. And then it goes to Congress Park, where actually it had a scheduled 15-minute flip. And the reason it had that is because it's running against the flow of traffic. It can sometimes run into delays based on other things happening on ADA lifts, medical emergencies, unruly passengers, police activity, all kind of different things that can happen. So you had to build in a little bit because by the time you get to that third flip and it comes back into the city, it arrives at 8:17. So the new way the schedule works, it leaves a little bit earlier, it gets to Western Springs earlier. Then it hits Union Station 6 minutes later. It now gets its 15 minutes to flip. It then turns and does all the same things it's got to do to get to Congress Park. On the old one, it was actually called 1242. This is another interesting thing. Passengers call the train by the time they get on it at their station. Railroaders can't do that. We have to actually call the train by a name regardless of what station it's at. So the old 1242 is now 1244, and that, for some people, really drives them nuts. The fact is, it finally gets back into Union Station 4 minutes later. So one it definitely is earlier, one is definitely later. But you can see, if I had to do this again and we had to open up the flips, you can start parlaying. So the earlier trains within a rush hour, they weren't as affected as the later trains in a rush hour, and that applies both directions. All right, so what will PTC not do? It will not speed up a train. It cannot operate the train. It will only set the brakes, put it in a safe condition. It won't slow it down. It will stop it. It will not stop a train with an object in the right-of-way, such as a vehicle, animal, person, tree, shopping cart, you name it. If there's something in front of the train, PTC will not stop it. There are some people that say, well, I don't understand. It takes a quarter mile to stop a passenger train from 60 miles an hour. We go 80 miles an hour, and freight trains take a lot longer to stop. It will not do that, so it cannot prevent every single crash. We almost got it. Should have kept going. All right, and it will not operate within the limits of the depot, not currently. In other words, once it actually hits a depot and it's approaching its bumping post, that's all on the operator. So we've put procedures in place dealing with the operator to make sure that they're attentive and alert, and it will not operate within yard limits. Yard limits are where we are in our yards. It would make no sense in the world every time we have to cut the engine off to reinitialize it just to move it in a different direction. So this crash here happened in Glendale, and this may have been a little bit of a precursor. You can see there's 3 tracks here. This happened in 2005, 11 deaths, 130 injured. This was an abandoned car on the center track. One Metrolink train derailed, crashed into an oncoming Metrolink train, and then popped into the freight train parked on the adjacent track. PTC would not have prevented this. So what are our risks right now? Communication is one of our biggest concerns. Radios. Our radios currently right now today operate at 100 messages per second. That's not enough. Once we fully sent out all the BNSF equipment, we're experiencing already at 125 messages per second. We know as the corridor, that entire region gets bigger, that's only going to get higher. We're putting a patch on this week from the radio manufacturer to get us up to 150. There's considerations with that. After that, it's going to be a hardware change. It's going to be a redesign of a radio. Everyone in the country knew Chicago was going to be the big place, and that this is going to be our weak link is right now getting these communications in line. Human error. We know that there's going to be human error out there. Training, but people will make mistakes. That's kind of why the 15 minutes are in there. Interoperability, the ability to communicate with all the railroads. There are 14 railroads in Chicago, and all of their back offices potentially could be working together. Durability, what that means is just like anything, just like your iPhone or your computer, it's going to need changing. Eventually, we're going to start running into, well, this is wearing out, or that's failing, or this thing's burning up. And so these are some of the risks that we see moving forward. Let me see if we can get it. It must be my PowerPoint program isn't up to thoughts. All right, so opportunities. Throughput in the depots and overcrowding. So we definitely had overcrowding issues. But understand one thing about throughput, that there's only so many tracks. Trains have to come in. People have to get off the trains. On our heaviest trains right now, we've been measuring these kind of things that we've never had to measure before. If you get off next to the engine, it could take you 12 minutes to get through the crowd to get to where the glass doors are. Well, during that period of time, typically we don't like moving the train out. We do, but now with PTC, it's going to be one of these things that we're going to have to see where PTC and this train sitting here a little longer than the one on the adjacent track, because the last thing you want to do is be unloading 1,700 people on a track and bringing another 1,000 on top of that and make that matter worse. So some of the adjustments we've been making in the last 8 days have been literally looking at where the trains normally would land. Can we get opportunities? And it's like a game of shell game. You move one train one place and you create another problem somewhere else. There's some enhanced features that eventually I think we'll be able to take away from PTC, and it'll help help us. I think our goal right now is just to get this thing deployed. Future block segments, what that means is they talk about trains operating within a sector from this signal to this signal. It's called a block. Possibility of this PTC system, since the front of this train knows where the back of its train is, and so on and so forth, and it knows what its rolling target is in front of it, you can actually operate more trains within a segment. And that could actually help us throughput. For the freights going across Nebraska, that's probably a big opportunity for them. Once again, railroad safety. We're one of the safest modes of transportation in the country. Last year, nearly 40,000, a little over 40,000 motor vehicle accidents that resulted in fatalities out there. We had 1,000 in Illinois. Commuter trains last year moved 500 million people. Once again, sometimes we have our incidents. This is going to make the system even safer. Without PTC today, the industry remains safe, and this is just an added layer on top of it. With that, I think I've taken you through 101, maybe a little bit of the reason why some of the dilemma we're having, and if you have any questions for Pete or myself.
Thank you. Great presentation. Questions? Yeah, Director DeWitt.
Just curious, I ride UPS on UP West line on a regular basis. What is the schedule as far as laying this program out line by line? Are you going to run all the BNSF lines first and then move?
Good question. You want that one?
Well, yeah, the UP is going to be the next one. In fact, they were interviewing contractors this week for possible schedule changes. I don't believe that the UP is going to face as big a challenge as the BN just because of the sheer volume. The BN, that line alone, were 94 trains. On the UP, it's 3 separate lines. Now, one thing we have to take into consideration on the UP is you could have a train come in on the Northwest line, in fact, the one that I take does, and then it goes back out with a new crew up on the North line. And that's a fairly quick turnaround. So it's really the turnaround times that we're concerned with. But the UP schedules currently do pretty well as far as their on-time performance. They've got different challenges as well, but a lot less freight, and they're able to adhere to that 95 a lot easier than the BN. So I would say there's going to be changes. We don't know exactly what, but I don't believe they'll be at this degree. We actually took this schedule and really just shook it out. And in the history of Metra, I've been there 35 years in ops, my whole career. We've never done anything like this before, where we've taken a schedule and really redid it. And this is a big line, but PTC is what drove us to it, and we think we've got most of those bugs ironed out now.
So the next phase you think is 6 months out, 12 months out?
I would say within the next 6 months.
Right now, they're rolling out and testing on the Northwest and the North line. One of the indications they've given us is later this year, those 2 lines will be up and running, with the West line being the last line because of all the freight trains that are on it. I guess one thing I touched on is the 4 elements earlier for our extension. There's 4 elements. So it's not like we're going line to line to line. Literally, we're working 5, 6 lines at the same time right now. And with leaders like the BN and the UP having their own workforces there, we're working with them with the passenger side of the thing and the messaging side of the thing, but we're working on our lines as well. There's 4 elements that we need to actually get the extension. We're putting in the application for revenue service demonstration on the Rock Island on July 9th. Once we get in revenue service demonstration and meet the criteria, that is one of the 4 elements for Congress to give us an extension. Actually, the FRA, Congress is allowed to do that, allowed the FRA to take care of that. We have to have all the onboard and all the wayside equipment installed. That'll be done by October of this year. And you have to have acquired your spectrum. We've done that 2 years ago. So we are in a great position by the end of this year to have an extension. The Rock Island, once again, will be in revenue service demonstration. After that, we're looking toward the Southwest service for Metra's next line that it's going to work on. By then, the UP line should be up and running. But there's still a lot of lessons to be learned, once again, as the UP is really now getting into the passenger end of the business. The Burlington, so on Metrolink trains, they actually operate on Metrolink's back office. They then transverse over the Burlington tracks. Then they go to an Amtrak segment, and then they go to Union Pacific. So they've got experience out there, but now bringing that experience to Chicago is what they're doing.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen.
Director Colson.
Follow up. In my area, I get asked about the CN line to Antioch a lot. Can you tell me what the schedule is for that?
That'll be later 2020.
Yes, Director
Jim,
Lewis.
2 questions. One, what's the plan for Metro Electric? There's a lot of conversation about that, particularly given some of the needs of the residents. How's this going to impact the Metro Electric? That's question 1.
So the Metro Electric's so robust with its schedule. And to answer your question, when we're going to deploy it, there's a technical issue over there because of the fact that it's got electronic braking system, and there's some modifications that are going on right now that we're going to have to modify all 186 cars for this particular system. It's not going to make us miss any of our deadlines. As far as the impact on the operation goes, we're going to have to study that. Mostly down at Randolph Street is where the big congestion comes in. And the difference is trains run what's called cycles. So I showed you 12, 16, turns into 17, turns into 42. On Metro Electric, that's not really the way it works. We have a 6-car train comes in. It could be 102. And when it gets in, the yard master might say, I'm taking 2 to the yard, 2 are going to Van Buren, and 2 are going to run to South Chicago. So each and every day, what's going to have to happen is the dispatchers are going to have to understand the time frame they need to set the train up to go. Typically right now, it's never going to be a problem because it's like a half hour in advance. You're doing all of this other stuff as the crews are cutting the other cars away. But there's never, ever been a cycle on MED.
But one thing on Metro Electric that could affect it is during the rush hour, especially in the evening, a lot of the trains are coming out of the yard, which is at 14th Street, and they're coming in, and we only have 5 tracks, and we run 156 trains on the weekday there on Metro Electric. So a train will leave a track, and another one's waiting to come in, and some of those trains turn in 5 or 6 minutes. I can see that those schedules will probably be adjusted because they're going to need more time for this initialization. However, after we see the BN up and running and some of these other lines, we may be able to reduce that 12 to 15-minute turnaround time. We may see that we don't need all that time. We were being as conservative as we could because last thing we wanted to do is put a schedule in effect and find out we didn't give us enough time. So how that's going to impact the electric, it's hard to say, but I suspect that some of those rush hour trains will get pushed back a little bit. The window will just open a little bit wider than it is today for our rush hours.
Okay. I know there's a concern about the amount of transportation that goes to that community, so that was why I was asking that question. The second and final question is, I know that CTA is also charged with the same responsibility for PTC. Is that not correct?
That is not correct.
That's not correct?
Yeah. This is Federal Railroad Administration. You have to operate on the National Railway Network. All the rapid transit agencies do not fall under this regulation.
Okay, good. Then, because I was going to ask if since there's parallel tracks, I didn't know if the sharing, but if that's the case, then that's a moot point. Thank you.
Any other questions? Just a comment. We had a question over here to Jeremy and myself about the state. It's primarily the state's responsibility with respect to railroad safety. There's the ICC, there's IDOT, and even the Secretary of State's office gets involved. This is a $400 million unfunded federal mandate with a continuing cost of $10 to $15 million a year to Metro, which falls on the riders and the taxpayers who support Metro. The state has basically done next to nothing with respect to helping out with this federal safety mandate, which is a state responsibility. And I just want to point that out. And I give just massive kudos to Metro, who has tried to figure out, as B will tell you, in a really tough budget context, where do you find $400 million to unveil what is, and we all know, how frustrating it is with our own computer system. How do you roll this thing out, which is just incredibly complex? So, I thank you and your staff. Everybody needs to be patient here. It's not as if we didn't get a warning. And Jim, I have told everybody that I see, including law partners and people at my law firm, and look, you gotta be patient. This is not going to be, it will not be without glitches. It just can't be. It's too complex. But we're learning. I know you're improvising and making some changes from what we learned in the first 10 days or so. One last question for you. Now that it's not like a typical summer day today, air conditioning. Are we experiencing more issues with air conditioning because we have older fleets, or what's going on with air conditioning on Metro this summer?
Yeah, and then air conditioning on a BNSF's been probably the most troubled spot. So you take a train that we've shifted the schedule around, people move, now they get on a 95-degree day train and it's hot in that car. They're not going to sit in that car. That makes that train even have more overcrowding. I get that. I understand that. We've got extra people over at the BN. We've moved cars to the BN specifically not because of the fact of the PTC, but because of the fact we've been having some air conditioning issues. We have the oldest fleet in the country. About 1/3 of their fleet is the real old stuff. Over half of their fleet is non-rehabbed within the last 10 years. So you've got some aged equipment out there that's just developing a lot of leaks. And with air conditioning, if you don't know this, the way it kind of works is you can test it up in February and March and April, and that all works fine. It's not till you stress it that it'll pop. And you don't stress it just being out in 95-degree heat. You stress it by putting 150 hot people in the car, and it's 95-degree heat. That's when, unfortunately, the real pressure inside the system causes the weak links to come out.
When you rehab cars down on, on 50th and the Dan Ryan down there, our air conditioning units, when, I ride in a car that was delivered when Dwight Eisenhower was the president. Most people can't believe that. It's eligible for Medicare, as your predecessor, Don Orsino. But, it's a car that was delivered. It looks nice, looks new, because you guys have rehabbed it 1,000,000 times. So are you able on these older cars, if the budget allows, do you put new air conditioning systems on these things, or do you just kind of Band-Aid together what's been on below the car or below the train sitting down there forever?
So on your Eisenhower car, they have what's called underslung air conditioners. It's a really poor design. The air conditioning system itself actually hangs out front of the car, so it's subjugated to getting hit by rocks and other debris. It's hard to people don't really believe that there's a lot of debris on the tracks, but these cars are banged up from the underside all the time. Move forward to the next generation of cars, the air conditioners are up above the center vestibule. For us to remove one of those air conditioners, it takes about 7 days.
Wow.
The way they design that car, you have to take the physical walls out of the vestibule, build false floors in, drop the units down. So a lot of those cars, we actually just work on the air conditioner, find our smallest guys that can squeeze in the hole and aren't worried about working with a torch while they have to braze new lines in. But work on those and just kind of not Band-Aid them, but keep them running. During the rehab, if they need a compressor, if they need a condensing fan motor or stuff like that, we go ahead and take a look at it. All our new cars, everything since '94, they're the way to build cars. Within 3 hours, we pop a whole unit out, pop a new unit in, then that unit goes to the back shop to get worked on. So we've been supplying out of our rehab, the Burlington, any of those cars that have any type of issues, just rehabbed air conditioners. And all air conditioners now are shifting to a new Freon because of different laws. So all air conditioners are actually getting torn apart. You have to put all new components in it and all that kind of stuff. So to answer your question, yes, they do get an overhaul, but some of the cars on some of our lines out there, it's been 26 years since they were last rehabbed, and on those cases, it's just repair as needed.
Great, thank you. Anything else? Yes, John, Director Krieger.
Jim, got a question. I noticed that the freight trains do not have lights on the back. Is that causing a problem? Is that a safety problem? If a car had no lights in the back, we would be up in arms about it. What about a freight train?
So all freight trains have what's on the back. If it's let's just say an over-the-road freight train, it's got an end-of-train device, and that end-of-train device is sending wirelessly the signals to the engine and to the dispatching, knowing where the back of the train is. Remember, too, unlike a car that can switch lanes, the train's only on one track. So the dispatcher knows when the train enters that track segment, he can't allow, by what he's supposed to do, he can't allow another train to come into the back of that one until that one's cleared the blocks in front of it. And that's what the signal system's designed to do. So when the wheels of that back car leave the block, that block then turns yellow, or actually it's 2 blocks back turn yellow, and eventually when it's 2 blocks ahead, it turns green. So the signal system's protecting the back of the train. Now the interesting thing is with PTC, the engineer has to punch in every single car in his train. He has to punch in, and there's a wayside bill on the side of the car, which is electronic as well. It actually will know the weight of the car, so it will know the weight of the train. It knows the braking system on the engines, so that this braking algorithm, it knows whether I'm an empty coal train, I stop in this distance, or if I'm a loaded coal train, I stop in this distance, or if they cut half my coal cars off, or if they added 4 extra engines, or if one of my engines broke down. PTC will do all of that. It'll make it a much more enhanced system. If you see a freight train without a rear end light on it, it might be just a little small move, and they might just have they have to have a red mark on the back end, so they might just have a flag back there.
Director Friga and I are old enough to remember the caboose. We used to wave to the gentleman in the caboose. Director Pang.
I just have a comment. It was an incredibly informative, meaningful presentation, and you have this ability to take very detailed, complex information and make it consumable by people like me. And if you had a weekly podcast, I'd tune in. That's all.
Thank you.
I might have to sign you up for that. Add it to your list.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here, as always. Thank you. All right, Leanne, it's your report on item 6.
I don't want to follow.
Try to follow that act.
Yeah, I don't want to follow. Jim, can you come do my report now? Because you do such a better job. He's tired. Thanks, Jim. I will be fairly brief. As I say, begin where we always begin. Page down. So through the end of May, the state owes the RTA $452.5 million of ASA, AFA, and PTF monies. The state is 11 months behind on the ASA and 13 months behind on the AFA. That's essentially the payment on the debt service, the match to the debt service. The equivalent of 11.1 months behind in the payment for the Public Transportation Fund, and the year-to-date cost for carrying short-term debt on our part to cover that delay is already at $2 million. Okay, good. Jim, don't feel bad. It's happening to me too. Okay. Can we? Yeah. There. Oh shoot! Now I've screwed it up. Okay, I'll just keep going. It's not that we don't really need a picture of the State House. The Illinois General Assembly adjourned. Okay, more exciting pictures. The General Assembly adjourned on May 31st, and as a result, they were also passing a bipartisan fiscal year 2019 budget agreement. The budget contained $38.5 billion in state spending, as well as $1.3 billion in supplemental appropriations to address expenditures incurred in fiscal year 2018, which were not anticipated under the spending authority for the current fiscal year. But I want to make the emphasis, we were still cut. The budget contains a reduction in the statutory sales tax matching formula for PTF for fiscal year 19. However, the cuts were rolled back somewhat from 10% of a cut that we had the previous year to 5% in 19. As a result, the region should have approximately $20 million more than the previous year. Again, still less than what we would expect or what they had been obligated to provide us in matching funding. Similarly, the Illinois Department of Revenue administrative collection fee that was instituted in 18 has been, that's the sales tax haircut, or the sales tax fee as we call it, was rolled back from a 2% fee to a 1.5% fee. That results in about a $6 million sort of net increase. Again, still less, but it's hard to message that, but just want to make sure everyone understands. The budget agreement also contains $17.5 million of reduced fare reimbursement, similar to the lesser amount that we'd received last year, as well as $8.4 million in ADA paratransit funding. It also included $131 million in skip bond reimbursement funding. So I think just the other point I want to make, so really what that rolls up to is about a $30 million less on the operating side than we traditionally would have expected. So while the cuts are a little bit less, they are still cuts that we have to sort of manage through. In Washington, the majority of May and early June were focused on transportation, housing and urban development spending bill for 19, for federal fiscal year 19. You have a detailed summary of the bills that were voted out of the House and Senate committees at your place. So I think Jeremy put all those out for you today. And then today in the rain is Dump the Pump. So these are actually some pictures from last year because it was a lot wetter out there this morning. The RTA, along with CTA, Metro, and PACE, are celebrating the 13th Annual National Dump the Pump Day. It's a nationally recognized event in conjunction with the American Public Transit Association, encouraging people to think about giving up their cars and trying transit or trying alternative forms of transport for a day. Cubic Transportation Systems, the developer of Ventra, is one of our sponsors. We were providing free cups of coffee and donuts to transit riders around through the rush hour out at Rosemont, 95th Street Station on the CTA, and near Ogilvie Union Stations on Madison Wacker area this morning as well. We were giving out commuter packs and backpacks and water bottles to commuters as well. Tonight we've entered into a White Sox promotion at Guaranteed Rate Field. I've got it right. This will give us some national exposure to Dump the Pump and, more importantly, people considering transit. So tonight is transit night at the game. If there is a game, the way the weather's looking, we'll see. The first 10,000 fans that get to the park will get a T-shirt promoting the ease of getting to the game on transit. I think we'll also have some street teams at the stations out there promoting transit. I want to thank everyone on staff for their hard work and pulling all of these pieces together, and hopefully I think we've had a pretty successful morning, even weather considering. So that ends my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Probably staying under the shelter because it's going to be raining. We are supposed to be throwing out the first pitch. Yay. Me.
Right.
Yeah.
The word of the wise: don't bounce it. And the big question is, will you do it? Will you do it from the pitching rubber or in front of the mound? That's
I might
no pressure.
I might bring in some a relief pitcher for me.
Excellent, Director Colson.
I have a quick question on this contemplated fast tube to O'Hare Airport project. Do we know, is that a City of Chicago project, or is the CTA somehow going to be involved or on the hook? Do we know?
It's a City of Chicago. It's a project really being led by the mayor's office. Sarah, I don't know if you want to jump in, but it's envisioned to be a completely privately funded venture. Elon Musk is the company that the city has announced that they are continuing to talk to. I know that CTA has been involved in some of the discussions, as has aviation, as well as City Hall. So it's something that's being talked about, considered. It would not be a public facility, and at this point, it's not envisioned that any public dollars would be invested into that. And I think the other point to make is that transit and then the CTA and the Blue Line in this case still remains the workhorse and the sort of the spine or the core of the transit access to and from O'Hare.
And actually, the mayor's office reached out last night to get together with the chairman just to, basically they said everything that's been in the papers is all there is to talk about, but that they would, talk it through and would like to hear from you about your thoughts on oversight and that sort of thing.
Sounds great. And just to make it very clear, I had somebody last night at dinner ask me, what do you do with the Blue Line out to O'Hare? Hey, that is a workhorse, and I will give Mary Wisniewski credit. She did a very nice story within the last few days on the Elon Musk Boring Corporation, as it's called, project, but talking about how good the Blue Line is. We're continuing with our new Blue to improve that line immensely, but it's going to be there. And there were a couple of comments from commuters, regular working day commuters, that said, "Look, I'm not going to take the the underground if it does come to fruition. I'll continue to take the very inexpensive way in 40 minutes to take the Blue Line, which picks you up right underneath. You never have to walk outside." So I think there will be a lot of people, Bill, if Mr. Musk and the city is successful, there'll still be a lot of people that will take the Blue Line all the way into the city. But it's exciting, and Sarah called me last night and said, hey, the mayor's office wants to brief myself and Leanne on what's going on, and we'll report back to you. But, it's in the blue line, just so everyone understands, is better than virtually what every other city has. In fact, in Mary's story, it talked about in New York, you have to take a bus and then make a change to get a train to LaGuardia. So Chicago is way ahead of most cities, although Dallas just did transit out to their airport. So, I'm always cognizant of what other cities are doing. But lots of improvements to O'Hare, $8 billion. I give the mayor and his team credit for being very visionary here, and hopefully it will come to fruition, and we'll all get on the pod and get out to O'Hare in 12 minutes. Anything else? All right. Moving on to visionary things. Item 7 is the approval of a consent item as it appears, or consent items as it appears on the board agenda. 7A is the ordinances authorizing the execution of federal funding allocation agreements with Northwestern Indiana and our partners in southeastern Wisconsin, and amending the 2018 through 2022 capital program and extending the ICE-funded projects. 7B is the ordinance approving the combining financial report and certifying the compliance with the RTA Act recovery ratio requirements, which gets stronger as the year goes on. 7C, the ordinance approving and releasing the RTA 2017 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. These were all, I think we were all here this morning for the committee meetings. Any questions or further comments? If not, can I have a motion and a second to adopt these? Director Ross moves we adopt, seconded by Director Pang. Is there leave for the attendance roll call? Seeing no objection, leave is granted. And
14 ayes and 2 absent.
Items on 7 are approved. Item 8 is the approval of contract and expenditure items as they appear on the board agenda. It's the ordinance authorizing a contract amendment for the RTA's Fair Program vendor, Valid Identity Solutions, and travel reimbursements as they're now required to go before the board. Any questions on that? Is there anything from the staff on Valid Identity Solutions we need to know? If not, can I have a motion on the item 8? Director Trione moves that we approve 8A and 8B, seconded by Director Christopher Melvin. Is there leave for the attendance roll call? Seeing no objection, leave is granted.
14 ayes and 2 absent.
Approved are the items on 8, Madam Secretary. Thank you. Item 9 is a special action item, and I think most of you are familiar with it. It's an ordinance authorizing the acquisition of property by eminent domain. Nadine, I don't know if there's anything that we need to add, or if anyone has questions for Nadine.
Good morning, everyone. I didn't really have a lot of additional information to add besides what's already been provided to you, but I'm happy to take questions, and we also have Metro's Director of Property here to answer any questions you might have on this item.
Any questions? Yes, yes, sir.
All expenses regarding this action will be handled by Metro.
Yes, full reimbursement by Metro according to the terms of the IGA.
Great, thank you. Can I have a motion then on that we approve item 9A? It's moved by Director Fuentes, seconded by Director Trione, that we approve item 9A. And is there leave for the attendance roll call on this one? Seeing no objection, leave is granted, and 9A is approved.
14 ayes and 2 absent.
Thank you. Item 10 is new business. Any new business to come before the group today? Seeing none, a reminder that our next scheduled meeting is July 19th. It's hard to believe we're going to be into July, with committee meetings at 8:30 as usual, followed by the board meeting itself. So with that, how about a motion to adjourn? Director Melvin moves that we adjourn. seconded by Director Colson. All those in favor signify by leaving. Thank you, everybody.